Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Beef Up Front podcast. This is your host, Ryan Coyle. And today I'm joined again by Kevin Walder as we continue our NFL preview series. And today we will be diving into the AFC North. Kevin missed the show last week where we ran over the AFC East. So before we start doing the AFC North today, Kevin's just going to run through his AFC East predictions. How you doing, Kevin?
I'm doing pretty good. Good to be back. Yeah, like you said, I'll just run through my AFC East predictions real quick. I was actually surprised to see how similar ours were, just because I thought I had a team near the top that would surprise a few people. But so in the East, I have the Bills going 9-7, finishing first, and that's good enough for the fourth seed in the AFC playoffs. I have the Dolphins finishing 8-8, which is what you have, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Same thing so far.
I think the Dolphins could be a team that sort of takes that next step. Not this year, maybe next year. I really like Tua Tagovailoa and Brian Flores down there. I'm a huge fan of Brian Flores, so I like what the Dolphins are building down there in Miami. And then third place, I have the New England Patriots. Weird to say that since they basically own this division for so long, but I have them going 7-9, finishing third in the division. And then last place, I have the New York Jets, finishing 10-6, which doesn't really seem right.
6-10.
Yeah, 6-10. Sorry, that doesn't really seem right, just because they finished 7-9 last year. But I don't know. I just not a huge Adam Gase fan. I like Sam Darnold, but I don't know. I just don't see it this year from the Jets.
Yeah, and then since I did that show before the Adams trade, that might have. It's a defensive back. I don't know how many games he's gonna change you in the win-loss column, but still definitely a big loss for that defense.
Thoughts on who won that trade?
On paper, I'd definitely say the Jets won.
Yeah.
You got so much ammo back, but I was looking at the Jets' past first-round picks. The Quentin Williams, the third overall pick in the 2019 draft. He only played 1 year so far, but their past 5 or 6 years before that, no one made it out of their first-round picks to their fifth year. So it'll be interesting. Now including Jamal Adams as well. It'll be interesting to see what they can do with those draft picks.
New GM. We'll see how Douglas can do up there. I'm a Douglas fan.
Yeah. So we'll see. Did just before we started with the North, did the Cam Newton signing change your mind on any of the Patriots games? Because when I went to look back through mine, it didn't change anything for me, really.
Yeah. You would think, based on how the media has sort of been hyping up the Patriots ever since the Newton deal went through, people are saying, oh, they're going to make the playoffs, they're going to make the AFC Championship again. I just don't know. Cam Newton really has been unproven ever since his MVP year.
Yeah.
And he seems to be banged up all the time. And I don't know, just going through the games again, I didn't end up changing a whole lot. I think he gave him one extra win, so
yeah,
that's pretty much it.
I don't know. I think there was a reason why he was unsigned for so long. If he was this good still, someone would have snatched him up earlier in the offseason. But so with that being said, we'll start off with our AFC North predictions now. You want to start us off this week, Kevin?
Yeah, I'll go. AFC North, I think other than the NFC East, probably my favorite division in football. So exciting to talk about. And I went back and forth on the who will win this division. I went back and forth. I originally had the Ravens winning it. Then I had the Steelers winning it up until about a half an hour to an hour ago when I reached out to an inside source that I have who's very close to the Ravens organization. And he basically talked me into placing the Ravens number one in the division. And honestly, when you look at their roster, I think it's very hard not to make the Ravens the number one team in the AFC North. And shout out to Schmierit, by the way, in Philadelphia, best bagels in the city. So if you ever craving a bagel, yeah, that too.
Only if you call it a bagel, not a bagel.
Yeah, well, anyway, shout out Schmierit. But Ravens, I have them finishing 11-5, 4-2 in the division. That's good enough for the 3 seed in the AFC playoffs, I think I could be underselling this Ravens team, to be honest, because I gave their offense an A plus. I think this offense is absolutely loaded with talent, and honestly, I think it's on par, if not better, than the Cowboys for possibly the best offense in the NFL.
Wow.
They had a historically good year last year, and they didn't lose anyone. They didn't lose in fact, except like Hayden Hurst. But honestly, I think they got better in the offseason, adding guys like J.K. Dobbins, Devin Duvernay, a guy I absolutely love. At my Texas Longhorns, I was hoping the Eagles would grab him, but I think he'll fit right in with this team just based on their speedy wide receivers. He'll be another deep threat weapon for this offense. I mean, they went 14-2 last year, and they brought back everyone. The entire coaching staff is back. I think that's going to be a huge advantage, especially this year.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, you see a team go 14-2. They're not bringing back the same offensive coordinator. They're losing like at least some coaches. They didn't lose anyone, and I think the only reason I have them losing a few games is because I don't think it's statistically possible to have as good of a season as Lamar did last year. So I think he's just due for a natural step back. Although I still think he'll be a really good quarterback. But I don't know, more tapes out on him. He threw for a ridiculous touchdown rate last year, and I think
Yeah.
that really just can't be sustained. But I love the ground game. I love everything about this offense, really. And it doesn't stop there. Their defense, I gave them an A as well. I think they have the best secondary in the NFL, and I don't think it's really that close. They got Marlon Humphrey, Earl Thomas, Marcus Peters. They're like brothers back there. They're real close. And perhaps I think the most underrated move this offseason was the acquisition of Calais Campbell. They got him for a 5th-round pick, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Like
something like that.
that's a guy who,
Cheap deal.
yeah, and that's a guy who's going to come in and he's going to make a significant impact. It kind of reminds me of the what's the guy's name? I'm blanking on it right now. He just retired. Bennett. It reminds me of
Michael
when the
Bennett.
Eagles brought in Bennett, and it was just kind of like they didn't really give up anything for him, and Bennett was probably their best pass rusher that year. Um, Matt Judon is also a guy who I think is going to have a really good year this year, who doesn't get talked about a lot. So yeah,
Playing
like I
on the
said,
franchise tag.
yeah, you gotta think he'll be hungry, looking for big payday.
Yeah.
Um, so like I said, this is a complete team, and when it gets rocking down there at M&T Bank Stadium, down there's the bank they call it. There's
No
not much.
fans.
No fans. What are you talking about? Don't tell that to the Ravens faithful, the Ravens flock.
I mean, it's at this point, it's just inevitable. At least at least we have an agreement in place that there will be football, but I don't see fans being in the stadium.
Yeah, actually, you're right. I completely forgot about that. I just wanted to say something about the M&T Bank Stadium atmosphere. But yeah, moving on. The coach grade, A. I'm not as high on John Harbaugh as most people are, but still, he has a Super Bowl ring, and he really impressed me this past season because he molded his offense around the quarterback, and I think that too often a coach will try to fit a quarterback into his scheme, and it kind of ruins him, the quarterback. But I really give John Harbaugh props for sort of building around what he had in Lamar Jackson, and I don't know. You can't really give a guy coming off a 14-2 season a bad coaching grade, so I'll give him an A. And breakout player, I say Patrick Queen, the rookie linebacker out of LSU. I know you're also going to talk about Patrick Queen, so I won't go too much into detail about him just because I think that there's a bunch of guys that might break out for this Ravens team. Hollywood Brown is easily another guy who I think could have a monster year. So just really, J.K. Dobbins is another guy who I think can take the reins as a starting running back towards the second half of the year and become like sort of one of the premier running backs in the league. He's got all the talent. But yeah, Queen's just a guy got sideline to sideline speed, sort of built for those AFC North slugfests they have when it starts getting cold out. And then two big games on the Ravens. I have Week 9 at the Cowboys. Just because, like I said, I think they have the two best offensive groups in the NFL, so that'll be a really good game. See, might be. I'm sure when that game comes along, there will be a lot of people saying this could be a possible Super Bowl preview. And then I also have Week 12 at Pittsburgh because I have the Steelers finishing second in this division, and that game could decide who wins the division.
All right. Yeah, just before I get into mine, I was thinking after. I mean, we're gonna obviously ride with these picks that we've been doing on the podcast for our predictions, but I think it would be cool to also go back and look with no fans, and if no fans are going to be in the stadium, kind of would you change any of your predictions? Because a lot of these teams really rely on their home field advantage, and it'll be interesting to see if the home road makes a difference anymore with no fans being in the stadium.
That's an interesting point because I know when I go through and I predict every game in the
Yeah,
season, the home team dramatically impacts my pick.
yeah,
So
definitely. Especially when it's two teams that you think are even, you're just going to give the home team the benefit of the doubt in it. But my first overall place team in the AFC North, I thought it was going to be the Ravens. I have the Ravens in the Super Bowl, but it's the Pittsburgh Steelers finishing at 12-4 and 5-1 in the division. Offense grade, I gave them a B plus. You got Big Ben coming back healthy. You got a healthy James Conner after an up and down season last year where he was banged up, but we've seen over the years that he's a very, very good running back when healthy. A veteran offensive line, one of the older groups in the league, but they've been one of the top 10 offensive lines over the years, and they're all coming back. So you have the addition of Eric Ebron, who really has grown his game after kind of being a disappointment in Detroit early in his career, but then he went to Indianapolis for a few years and became one of the top 10 tight ends in the league. And you added Chase Claypool, who I was a big fan of in the draft, 6'5", 6'6" receiver / tight end out of Notre Dame. We don't know if he's going to be lining up outside or on the line, but just a big target. He had over 1,000 yards last year at Notre Dame. I really like him, and I think he's not really going to be a breakout player. He's Juju Smith-Schuster, already kind of has a name for himself in the league, but I think this year with a healthy Big Ben, we could see Juju's third year now or fourth year.
I think it's fourth.
I think this is a year where we could see him become top 5 receiver type in the league as long as we got a healthy Big Ben. Just because he's such a young receiver, still he's only going to be 22 or 23 years old during this year, and with Pittsburgh's track record of success with their receivers like Antonio Brown, Mike Wallace, Emmanuel Sanders over the years. Now you're throwing in a rookie like Claypool. I think that's going to benefit him. And I just think Juju, it's going to be his time to step up and become one of the premier receivers in the league.
It's fourth year.
Fourth year.
Mm-hmm.
Defense grade, I gave him an A as well. Just one of the best overall units in the league on paper when you look at it. And Mike Tomlin's just been a great defensive coach as well over the years. You got veteran, reliable stars and Joe Hayden on the back end and Cameron Hayward on the defensive line, a great pass rusher, a great run stuffer. He just shows up every week ready to play. He's like the Fletcher Cox of the Pittsburgh Steelers, just kind of a guy who he's not going to get all the big stats all the time, but he's still a very, very solid player, and he's going to be making plays for them. He's kind of holds that defensive line together. And then you have one of the best defensive players in the league in TJ Watt, who could be in the running for defensive player this year. I think he had 14.5 sacks last year or something. I could see him getting up to 19 to 20 this year, as long as all goes well and he stays healthy. And then you got Devin Bush at linebacker. Had a great rookie season, but kind of flew under the radar. He didn't really get the publicity I think that he deserved. And just a strong secondary all over. There's not really a weak spot. You got Mike Hilton back there. You had Edmonds from Virginia Tech, former first-round pick, who could come into his own this year. He struggled a bit, but still a somewhat reliable player. And Joe Hayden, as I touched on earlier. So you got a lot of reliable guys. There's no weak spot of that defense. You lost Javon Hargrave on the defensive line this offseason to Philadelphia, but other than that, the rest of the defense is back and looking as strong as ever for the Steelers. Coach grade, I gave Coach Tomlin an A minus. He's just been a great coach for a while, but I feel like he's underperformed in the playoffs in recent years, especially back when they had the Killer Bees and Roethlisberger, Big Ben, Le'Veon, and Antonio Brown. And that group never made it to, I think, even a conference title game, let alone a Super Bowl. So that he's been a kind of underperforming coach in the playoffs. But other than that, you can't really say that there's 5 better coaches in the league than him. And he had this team on the brink of the playoffs last year, despite so many injuries and Devlin Hodges and Mason Rudolph quarterbacking them. They were right there competing. So just a great overall coach and one of the best in the league. My breakout player, I touched on him a bit earlier with Devin Bush. I think it's hard to pick here of so many veteran, reliable guys on this roster, but Bush had 109 tackles last year in his rookie year. He had 1 sack. I think he tops those numbers this year. He gets up to the 120, 130 range of tackles, maybe 3 or 4 sacks. We kind of see him grow his game and become a more versatile linebacker for Pittsburgh. And I just think he becomes one of the top 5 linebackers in the league this year. He becomes a household name. And 2 big games. I got Week 5 versus the Eagles, Battle of Pennsylvania, two playoff caliber teams coming into the year at least. And then Week 12 at home versus the Ravens. I feel like the Ravens and the Steelers will split their 2 matchups, home and home. So that you got to win that Week 12 game at home versus them, and that'll be, as we getting towards the end of the season, that'll be very important, especially for the division race and when it comes to seeding as well. So that's what I got on the Steelers.
Yeah, something interesting I wanted to talk about. You mentioned how Bush is going to up his sack numbers. I think that could be something you see across the league, is just really high sack numbers this year, just because there's going to be no crowd, there's going to be no noise. So like the defensive line is really going to be able to sort of key on that snap count. Yeah. And I think that's going to be something to watch throughout the year, because I think I've heard quarterbacks say that that's like one of the number one worries that they have going into this year, is how they're going to mix up the snap count so these guys aren't just sitting on it. But yeah, you have them at number.
But just before you add on to what you're saying, I think defenses might also be able to like decipher teams' audible calls more and stuff. I mean, if you hear an audible called once or twice in the game, clearly it's not just like a muffled sound. You'll be able to recognize that as the game goes on, and maybe, like you said, take advantage of that with no crowd noise coming in. Unless it's in Atlanta and they're pumping in more fake noise, that could be a factor this year.
Your Ravens. They're not your Ravens.
Falcons?
Your Falcons. Jeez, what's going on? It's been a long day.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyway, I'll go to my number 2 team. You have them at number 1. I had them at number 1 at one point. Pittsburgh Steelers, I have them going 10-6, finishing 2nd in the division. Mike Kelly's Pittsburgh Steelers, shout out Mike. I have them actually going 6-0 in the division, but 10-6.
And the Ravens going 4-2.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy.
I have them taking both from the Ravens.
Wow.
But that's the 3 seed in the. That's not the 3 seed. What am I doing? That's the 7 seed. 7 seed in the AFC playoffs. Let me just double check that. Yeah, 7 seed in the AFC playoffs. So, I mean, they went 8-8 last year without Big Ben. So how can you not have them at least 9-7? I have them 10-6. Their offense grade, I gave them a B+. I think this is a respectable unit, but there's not much star power going through the roster other than Big Ben. And they obviously need him to stay healthy this year if they want to make the playoffs, because we've seen from last year Mason Rudolph, Devlin Hodges don't seem to be the guys. But I think a big question on this team is, can Juju truly be a number 1 like star wide receiver? Because we saw him really break out when Antonio Brown was there, but he wasn't there last year, and Juju really struggled. I mean, I don't know how much of that is due to his quarterback, but he just wasn't the same guy. if he can get back to being the number one star wide receiver that we all saw him sort of being on track for before last year, that'd be an absolute like game changer for this team, I think. Um, they shored up the offensive line a little bit. I mean, the offensive line isn't terrible. Stefan Wisniewski's the guy they brought in. We both saw him play. He's a respectable guard in this league, so that'll make the team better. They also brought in Eric Ebron, like you talked about, solidify the tight end position with Vance McDonald as a backup. That's a pretty good tight end group. I'm not gonna say I'm not gonna say it. Trust, that'll come later. That'll come later. But another key component for this team is they need James Conner to stay healthy. He was banged up a ton last year, and I think it really hurt him because other than him, well, they have some guys who are talented. Snell, Anthony McFarland, the rookie. That's his name, right?
Yeah, I like
I believe so.
out of
Yeah.
Maryland.
So I think they have talent behind him, but it's sort of just a bunch of group of guys right now. But like I said, I think this team will go as far as Big Ben takes them. And looking at the rosters, I think it's just so clear that the Ravens have so much more talent than the Steelers. Their defense grade, I gave them a B plus. You said a lot of what I was going to say. They've got good guys on the back end. I don't think you mentioned Minka Fitzpatrick.
Oh no, I slipped my mind.
I like that trade last year, and he's really been a guy who came into his own as a leader on this defense, and arguably a top 3, 2, maybe 1 safety in the league.
He's versatile. He can do it all. He's kind of like plays like Tyrann Mathieu role.
Yeah, he did have a lot of picks last year. I don't expect that to sort of be sustainable, but I still think he's a guy who has a ton of talent. And guys like T.J. Watt, Devin Bush, like you said, I think the loss of Javon Hargrave is actually more than you made it out to be. I think he's a big guy up front, their nose tackle, can stuff the run, can rush the passer. So I think that this defense is going to come down to, can they generate enough pressure up front with him gone, specifically up the middle. But I still think this is going to be a really good defense. And like you said, a Mike Tomlin defense is never going to be bad. So, and that brings me to the coach grade. I gave Mike Tomlin an A. I think he's a proven, legit head coach. I mean, there's not many better than him in the business. About 2 years ago, I was starting to question about whether it might be time for the Steelers to move on with him, just because they had that down year 2 years ago. But I mean, the job he did last year really shut me up. Did he win Coach of the Year?
Tomlin? I don't think so.
I know he was in the running.
It was off the top of my head. I think it was Harbaugh. I think Harbaugh won.
That makes sense. But yeah, like getting that team to 8-8 last year was about as good of a head coaching job as you can have. And that brings me to my breakout player. I have James Washington. I don't think you touched on him. When you think about the good Steelers teams in the past, it seems like they always have a really good number 2 wide receiver to go along with their number 1 wide receiver. And I think James Washington is going to be that guy this year. He started to look really good last year. And there are some predictions that say like he might even be the go-to guy for Roethlisberger right now. You seem to think the 2 is going to be Claypool. I just said it would be Washington just because I've seen him do it. I saw him do it last year, and he looks like a good NFL wide receiver. So, and my 2 big games for the Steelers, I have Week 7 at the Ravens, and I have Week 12 hosting the Ravens. Just because, like I said, I have these 2 teams separated by 1 game, and I have them beating the Ravens both times. So if they lose one of these games, I think it's pretty much game over for them in the division. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So just while you were talking, I was just looking at my schedules because I have the Ravens in second place, also at 12-4, and in 5-1 in the division. Both the Steelers and the Ravens at 9-3 in the conference. So I'm not sure exactly what the next tiebreaker is. I think it might be like common opponents or something. And I have the Steelers at 10-2 versus common opponents, and the Ravens at 9-3. So I guess that's why the Steelers got the 1 seed, and the Ravens wound up getting the 5 seed in the AFC after finishing second in the North. So 12-4, still a very good year. Offense grade A-. I mean, you pretty much hit on everything. Lamar Jackson, obviously one of the most dynamic young players in the game. Mark Ingram and J.K. Dobbins form a very versatile and elite running back duo, I think. The only real question mark is at receiver, where the group is young and unproven. Besides Willie Snead, I think he's a reliable veteran who'll probably by the end of the year be their number 3 or 4 receiver. But other than him, it's kind of all a bunch of young guys like Hollywood Brown, Devin Duvernay. They took a James Prochet, I believe his name is, at SMU in the 6th round. He was a guy who had like a 3rd or 4th round grade. I heard from a lot of like magazines and whatnot, reading up on the draft, and he slid. So it'll be interesting to see what they can get out of those young receivers. I think Hollywood Brown is a big time breakout candidate as well. If you listen to the Fantasy Sleepers podcast a few weeks ago, he was mentioned there by me. They have him ranked around like 35th overall receiver. I think he'll definitely outperform that. He struggled with like a foot injury all year last year, and now he's healthy. So maybe he can be Lamar Jackson's wide receiver 1 going forward. Defense grade A-. I mean, I'll take a John Harbaugh led defense over almost any other group in the league year in and year out. Awesome secondary with Marcus Peters, Marlon Humphrey, Earl Thomas. You traded for Calais Campbell, like you were talking about. An underrated signing that you didn't touch on was Derek Wolfe, who's this very solid pass rusher over the years for the Broncos. They added him as well. Matthew Judon, like you were saying, he's playing on the franchise tag, so he's looking for a payday. He's going to be chasing double-digit sacks again. They've got a very good rotation. I think that you can rotate up front with their pass rush. And then Patrick Queen at the linebacker, I'll just hit on that. That's as my breakout player as well. I think he's the next one in line of the long lineage of linebacker success for the Ravens. You had Ray Lewis and you had C.J. Mosley who moved on to the Jets, but he's a Pro Bowl caliber player. I think Queen's the next guy. He was my favorite linebacker in the draft. I wouldn't consider Isaiah Simmons a linebacker, just more so defensive player. But I liked Queen over Kenneth Murray from Oklahoma. I just think he's just going to be he's going to be like Devin Bush was for the Steelers last year, just be able to step in, get you over 100 tackles right from the start, and just kind of be the guy for that defense in the middle. In 2 big games, Week 3 versus the Chiefs, probably looking at your AFC title preview right there in Week 3. That's a Monday night game. And then Week 7 versus Steelers, just as I was talking about earlier with the Steelers' big game being Week 12 versus the Ravens because it was the home one. This is the Week 7 versus Steelers for the Ravens. That's the Ravens' home game versus Steelers that I think they'll need to win. I have both the Ravens and Steelers at 12-4, 5-1 in the division, 9-3 in the conference. So really, even just came down to some percentages at the end of the day. But I like the Ravens to eventually advance to the Super Bowl out of the AFC this year.
Yeah, that's interesting. You don't have them winning the division, especially as good of a record as you have them. But I'll move on to my 3rd place team. I think we both have the same 3rd place team, Cleveland Browns. I have them going 9-7, 3-3 in the division. That's just missing the playoffs, obviously, because the Steelers were 10-6 and got the 7. Yeah. Their offense grade, I gave them an A-. I think they have a ton of talent around Baker. What's that face for?
Big.
That's not outrageous. A-. Look at all the talent they have around Baker Mayfield.
I know, but A-, that probably puts them in the top 3 to 5 offense out of your grades.
Yeah, I think they're around the top 5 talented offense. I mean, just go through the names.
All right, just let's hear what you have to say about Mayfield.
Okay, so my comment on this offense is they have all the talent around Baker. It's now up to him to show that he can win with it. That's the only thing holding me back on this Browns team because I thought he was the guy coming out of Oklahoma to turn this franchise around. I was a really big Baker Mayfield fan. He had a really good rookie year, but obviously last year he wasn't that guy. And we'll see how much of that was due to the coach, obviously bringing in Kevin Stefanski this year. But if it doesn't work out this year, I mean, I think you sort of have to start taking a look at seeing, like, is Baker the guy for us long term? Just because of how much he regressed in his second year. And usually we see the complete opposite from a quarterback. I mean, they really shored up this offense like in every other position other than the quarterback. They drafted Jedrick Wills. They added Jack Conklin, who's my favorite right tackle in football. I mean, they have one of the best tight end duos in the NFL in Hooper and Njoku. I mean, I don't think there's any debate as to if that tight end duo is better than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think it's clear that it is.
I was waiting for this comment. Cameron Brate, his best year, 660 yards and 8 touchdowns. And O.J. Howard's best year, 565 yards and 5 touchdowns. David Njoku's best year, 639 yards and 4 touchdowns. And Austin Hooper's best year, 787 yards and 6 touchdowns. And that's without putting in Gronk. So that duo was neck and neck pretty much.
What year was that Cameron Brate year?
2016.
Yeah. Okay. So 4 years ago.
But they've had another tight end in there since. He hasn't been their number one tight end. David Njoku is maybe the most hyped up tight end in the league.
Well, he hasn't been really healthy all that much.
He played 16 games his first 2 years. Last year he played 4 games.
You know
Those
who may
4
be
games he only had 5 catches.
You know who may be the most overhyped tight end in the NFL?
Are you going to say Gronk, the best tight end of all time?
No, O.J. Howard.
Yeah, I'm not saying O.J. Howard's a great tight end, but 565 yards and 5 touchdowns, it's pretty solid numbers.
Austin Hooper, O.J. Howard, who are you taking?
I'd take Hooper. But Hooper also is not some elite player. I think he got overpaid.
I think he's top 5 tight end in the NFL. Is that fair?
Has yet to eclipse 1,000 yards receiving.
Oh, that's hard for a tight end. How many tight ends are eclipsing 1,000 yards?
Kittle.
Kelsey Kittle. Ertz. Maybe Waller.
Yeah.
Last year. I don't know. He probably didn't get over 1,000 yards last year. But anyway, this offense is an A-. They're the best, one of the best offenses in the NFL. I mean, they have depth at tight end, they have depth at wide receiver, and they have depth at running back. They have depth at well, I don't know about depth, but they have a good offensive line. It's all up to Baker now. I think they have a fairly easy schedule this year too, so much better than last year. So we'll see. I've been going 9-7, so I think Baker has a good year this year. Something I want to touch on also. Baker doesn't start the year out well. Do you think we could see Case Keenum for this Browns team? Stefanski?
You could see it at some point. Stefanski was with the Vikings when he had the good year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I think that could
see
be
it at some point. And it's
new.
It's new management too. It's not the same GM who drafted Baker, so it's not like the management's going to be pleading to keep him in.
Obviously, I have Baker playing well this year, going 9-7, but I think that's something that could actually happen this year. It wouldn't be too crazy to have that happen. But anyway, defense grade for the Browns, I had them at a B. This team is surprisingly young when I looked in the secondary, just because it seems like they've had so many first-round picks over the past few years. They would have some like good established players in the secondary by now, but I mean, I do think they have some talent there. Obviously, they have Denzel Ward, but other than that, they're really young on the back end. They're starting 2 rookies, I think, the 2 LSU players, Delpit and Williams. Just another comment: this team has a lot of players from LSU on it, but when you look at the front end of their defense, it's almost completely flipped. They have a lot of veterans on the front end, guys like Myles Garrett, Sheldon Richardson, Olivier Vernon. So I think this defense will have to rely on the front end at least to start the year, because I don't know how ready those young guys are going to be on the back end. Even if they have a guy like Denzel Ward on the other side, they'll have to rely on that pass rush to start the year and sort of let the guys come into their own on the back end. And the coach grade, I have sort of a mandatory grade that I give every rookie head coach. I gave him a B-. We'll see how Kevin Stefanski can do. I don't know. He's a St. Joe's prep guy. I think he went to University of Pennsylvania, so obviously I'm going to be rooting for him. But good thing, he cannot possibly be worse than Hugh Jackson. So,
or Kitchens.
He could be worse than Freddie Kitchens, but Hugh Jackson, it's pretty hard to top that. So,
yeah.
Breakout player. On offense, I don't think there can be an offensive breakout player. I don't know who you picked, but I think they're pretty much all established guys on offense. So I went with just someone young on defense. I went with Grady Williams, the rookie cornerback out of LSU that I touched on earlier. Just for a lack of another breakout player, really. I think he has the swagger that you sort of need to be a good corner in this league. Obviously comes from a high background playing at LSU, winning culture. We'll see if he can bring that to the Browns defense. And two big games that I have for them is Week 6 at the Steelers, because we know there's no love lost between those two teams. Myles Garrett will be coming to Pittsburgh. I don't know. Well, there won't be any fans, so I guess it won't be as bad. But that'll be a good game, interesting game to watch. And I have Week 10 hosting the Texans, just because the Texans have been a playoff team over the past few years. So if the Browns want to sort of make that next step to being one of those playoff teams, this could be a game that they should win if they want to be taken seriously in the NFL.
All right. My third place team as well is the Browns at 6-10 though, and 1-5 in the division. I was on the Browns hype train last year, and I'm not getting on it this year. I just think Baker Mayfield is not the answer at quarterback, at least to make this team. I mean, I think he could. 6-10, I was kind of disappointed when I had them at that. I think they're more of a, what you said, maybe 9-7, but in between 7-9 to a 9-7 team. But just the way the schedule fell, I had them at 6-10. I just think Mayfield will hold them back. Offense, I gave them a B. You're loaded everywhere else. I think they were I think A- was a little high, but I think B+. I would give them with a better quarterback. But with Mayfield, I have him holding them back. There's a lot of big names on that offense though. But what has really Odell done in recent years? I mean, his last year with the Giants didn't do much. Last year with the Browns, he wasn't all that great. Jarvis Landry is always solid. He'll probably catch 100 balls till he dies, but he's not like a playmaker. He's definitely a great player to have on anybody's offense, but he's not a playmaker. He's not going to be getting you yards after the catch. He doesn't get a lot of touchdowns. He's just like a solid guy that you can throw out there every week, but he's not a star-studded player. The running back duo is great, though, with Hunt and Nick Chubb. I love that duo. That's probably the best duo in the league. And the offensive line was so bad last year, but you picked up right tackle in Conklin and left tackle in the first round in Wills. So Mayfield should be better protected now, but we'll see what he can do. He was just awful last year, but it was weird, because he really thrived under Freddie Kitchens the year before. So it was all on the coach, or was it on Baker? I mean, that's kind of what we'll find out more this year, I think. Defense grade, I gave them a B. They're just an average unit. Young secondary with some promising players like Denzel Ward and Grant Delpit, who I'll touch on in a little bit. You have a star pass rusher, Myles Garrett, which you need in the league. You need a game-changing type guy like him on your defensive line if you want to have a chance. You also have a few complementary solid pass rushers and an interior guy with Sheldon Richardson, and then an edge guy and Olivier Vernon, as you touched on. I just think that defense, too many question marks, especially at the linebacker, and the secondary is young, so we don't know what we're going to be getting out of them. Coach grade, I gave Stefanski a C. I just going off past track record of Cleveland head coaches, like, why should I feel confident in this new coach coming in now? I mean, he was the full-time offensive coordinator for 2 years, I believe, in Minnesota. But Gary Kubiak, longtime head coach in the NFL, widely regarded as one of the best offensive minds that's come through the league. He was on that staff last year as well. So how much of it was Gary Kubiak's doing and not so much Stefanski? It'll be interesting to see that. But like just like I was saying, like what will he do that Cleveland coaches in the past haven't? Like why should I be confident in him? I hope he proves me wrong. Like you were saying, I'm hoping the Browns can finally find a way to turn it around, but I'm not sure. I at the end of the year he could make me bite my words, but I'm not sure how I could be confident about another Browns hire. Breakout player, I have safety Grant Talbot out of LSU. I think he was slept on in the draft. I had him as a first-round talent, but he slipped into the second round. The Browns scooped him up. I think he could be the next great DB out of LSU. We've seen guys over the years like Matthew, Tre'Davious White, Jalen Mills has been a solid player in the NFL for a few years. I mean, there's just been so many LSU DBs in the league right now. I think Delpit could be the next great one. And he's a versatile guy who can move down in the box, maybe play a little linebacker sometimes, and also play the safety spot. So I think he's going to have a big year and make a name for himself right away. 2 big games, week 1 at the Ravens. First game under new coach Kevin Stefanski against arguably top 2 or 3 team in the AFC and the Ravens. And then week 17 versus Steelers. Can a Cleveland coach make it past year 1? That's always a big thing. So we'll see. And that's a rivalry game in the AFC North. So we'll see where the Browns are at by the end of the year versus Steelers. They're definitely one of the more polarizing and interesting teams that I'm interested to track going forward in the league this year.
Yeah, I feel like you might be jumping off the hype train a little too early. I don't know. I just think they have a lot of talent on that team.
Yep.
But anyway, I'll finish it off. We all know who I have last place. The other city in Ohio. I think it's Southwest. I believe it goes Cincinnati, Columbus, Cleveland, like that. So unless my geography is wrong and I just embarrassed myself, but I have the Bengals going 2-14. Nice. Obviously, not a good first year for Joe Burrow, and my offense grade, I actually gave them a B-. I think this team actually isn't as bad on offense as the record that I have them at. They do have some weapons. I mean, Joe Mixon, they got AJ Green, T. Higgins, they got Tyler Boyd. So, I mean, they're not a bad offensive team. I'm personally not a Joe Burrow guy. I know he hasn't played in a game in the NFL yet, but I look at him and I don't see what he's elite at. Like, I don't see what you can point at to Joe Burrow and be like, so is Baker Mayfield coming out of college. That was like his number one thing is, he's accurate. But we'll see. That didn't turn out great. But not an offensive line.
You're just saying how the Browns are going to do good.
I know, but has Baker Mayfield done anything? And has Baker Mayfield's teams done anything in the NFL yet? No. And I personally, no, I'm not going to say that. But
what?
I was going to say I personally would take Baker Mayfield over Joe Burrow, but after the season, how about this?
Quoting you on that.
I'll double down. I'll double down on that. I would take Baker Mayfield to start my NFL team right now over Joe Burrow.
Wow.
That could be one of the all-time bad quotes in the NFL.
Quote that.
But yeah, use that as like a headline grab.
before you continue, what do you think Joe Burrow's completion percentage was last season? I've never seen this before.
What was it, like 85? Something crazy like?
76%.
That's pretty good.
It's amazing.
It's pretty good. Well, look up Baker Mayfield's completion percentage in his last year at Oklahoma.
All right,
I bet it was. But like I said, they don't have a great offensive line. That won't help. That won't help Burrow in his first year. And I could be very wrong on Joe Burrow, but this is a hill that I'm gonna have to die on now. But their defense grade, I gave them a C. They did add a couple guys in the back end, like Mackenzie Alexander and Trey Waynes, couple of Vikings. You know, I'm big on my Vikings. But when I see this defense, it just seems like a bunch of journeymen who don't really excite me at all. And just the Bengals in particular are such a below-average franchise. No offense to the city of Cincinnati, but the Bengals just don't do it for me at all. Like, I see the Bengals logo, and I just, like, I don't know. I'm not a fan of it. Do you have the stat?
Yeah, Baker, 70.5 in senior year, 70.9 in junior year.
So it's not that far off.
6%, though, was a lot for. That's like saying if I was a 30% 3-point shooter, a 36%. There's a pretty big difference.
All right. Well, I take Baker Mayfield over Joe Burrow. I'll just keep saying that now. All right. Let me just finish off. Let me finish off the Bengals because I have a couple more insults to get out there. My coach grade, I gave Zach Taylor a C. I don't like anything about Zach Taylor. I don't like the way he spells his name in particular. I think the way he spells his name is a losing trait. I don't know. Do you know how he spells it off the top of your head?
Z-A-C.
Z-A-C. Like, just pick a C or a K to put on the end of your name. Don't just leave it Z-A-C, in my opinion. And also
Wait, what? You mean pick an H or a K?
Yeah. Did I say C?
Yeah.
That's my fault.
Like, he does have that.
Pick an H or a K to end your name. If your name is Zach, don't just leave it Z-A-C. I'm sorry to all of the listeners that we have whose names are Z-A-C. But just looking at Zach Taylor too, he just looks like a beta to me. I think he just there's nothing wrong with that as a person. I just don't want my NFL head coach to look like a beta. Like look what Zach Taylor looks like. So I'm questioning his ability to lead a little bit, to put it kindly. So I gave him a C. And my breakout player, sort of end on a positive note for the Bengals, I have T. Higgins. I think that T. Higgins is actually going to end up being one of the best wide receivers out of this draft, this loaded wide receiver draft. I don't really understand why he dropped. Well, I understand why he dropped because there were questions about his speed and his last year in college, but I think he has all the traits of an elite wide receiver, to be honest. And I was kind of hoping he would drop to the Eagles pick so the Eagles could sort of double down on wide receivers to start the draft, but obviously he didn't make it very far in the second round at all. I think he was the first pick. But T. Higgins is a guy who, I don't know, you don't really see rookie wide receivers break out that much, but I think he's going to have a really solid first year and be like a sort of guy where you look at him and expect him to be, like, I could sort of see him having a DK Metcalf year this year.
Yeah.
And my two big games for the Bengals, I have week 1 hosting the Chargers, just because it'll be Joe Burrow's first game of his career. Zach Taylor gonna want to start it out on a good note. They're gonna be playing another. Actually, I don't know. Tyrod Taylor might be starting that game, but could possibly be playing another rookie quarterback. So we'll see how those two match up. And I have week 4 hosting the Jacksonville Jaguars, just because I have the Jaguars as another very, very bad team this year. So it'll sort of be who can win that game and stack on a few wins.
Yeah, I thought what's his name? Higgins was one of those players. It was weird. He was just like a first-round pick throughout the whole year, and then he just kind of fell off the
Yeah.
radar come draft time. He was like basically like a Metcalf from last year to this year, so it'll be interesting to see what he can do in the NFL. I was a big fan of him, and I hope he does. I hope he does well with Joe Burrow this year and going forward. But offense, or excuse me, just started off. Bengals 4-12, so 2 games better than you, and 1-5 in the division. If I'm the Bengals, like I'll take that for the first year. You get out of Burrow, you get 2 more wins than the previous year, and then you can really uh, get another good top 5 pick probably with this record next year, and just continue to build that team. You just gotta hope Burrow progresses throughout the year. Offense grade, I gave him a B minus. I think the future is bright for this team. I'm excited to see what Burrow can do at the next level. I'm also not the biggest fan of his, but I think he's definitely going to be a starting caliber quarterback going forward. I don't know how great he'll be, but one of the most historic years last year. But he also was surrounded with tons of weapons. I mean, you had Edwards-Helaire, you had Jefferson. Those are 2 first-round picks right there. You had Jamar Chase, who's going to be probably a top 5, top 10 pick in the draft next year, a receiver. He was surrounded by so many studs, and the year before he was the starter for LSU too, and no one knew who he was really. Really flew under the radar and didn't have that great of a year. So we'll see if he can put together back-to-back years. And I'm not trying to compare him to this guy, but Mitch Trubisky really benefited off one really good year in college, and now look at him. He's probably going to be losing the job to Nick Foles. So it'll be interesting to see if Burrow can carry that forward. It doesn't sound like in many scouts' eyes that he is Trubisky and that he is the real deal. But another question for this offense: what is AJ Green these days? I mean, he's playing on the franchise tag, but I was listening to a podcast the other day. I think he's only played in either 8 or 9 games since 2018 season. So it'll be interesting to see if he's still the old AJ Green #1 receiver. I also have in here, can Higgins step up and prove that he is the future #1 for Joe Burrow, or will they decide they need to address that through the draft as well? I'm very interested to see in the progress of T. Higgins throughout this year. I don't know their tight end situation. I mean, the guys, just their names off the top of my head, I didn't know. I'm sure if I looked a little bit more into it that I would recognize, but these tight ends are very below average. That's a group they'll need to address going forward. Bad offensive line, probably one of the worst in the league. Just the biggest thing this year is to see how Burrow handles the struggles and the rough times, and if he really is, you can hang your hat on him as that guy. And I'm excited to see John Ross as well, the fastest 40-yard dash in combine history going into his 3rd year. Can he finally stay healthy? That'll be interesting to see. Defense grade C+, just a very underwhelming defense. It has a solid secondary with William Jackson III, Trey Waynes, and Mackenzie Alexander, 2 solid pickups from the Vikings, like you said. Very bad linebackers, though. And you got Carlos Dunlap and Geno Atkins on that defensive line. Those guys are just staples of that group. Feels like they've been there forever. That's just a solid veteran duo that'll hold that front group together, and kind of be their leaders of that defense. But this is a team that not going to get much help from their defense. So Joe Burrow might be playing in shootouts from the get-go. And I didn't even touch on the offense, I think, with Joe Mixon. He's a top 10 running back in the league and versatile guy who can catch screens, run outside, run inside. He's a very good player, and hopefully he can make a name for himself. He's just been playing on a bad team in Cincinnati. Coach grade, I gave Taylor a C+. Just not much to evaluate off last year. He didn't do anything great, obviously, in a 2-win season, but they had a very bad roster, not a very talented team. But I said, look what Brian Flores did in Miami. He got them to 5 wins, and they probably had the least talented roster. Taylor only got 2. So I'm glad they didn't fire him. They're going to give him another chance this year just because they had such a bad roster, and it was just such a mess last year in Cincinnati, especially with A.J. Green not playing at all and Andy Dalton really knowing that he was on his way out. I'm interested to see if he can be the head coach of the future for the Cincinnati Bengals with Joe Burrow, and they can kind of form a good relationship. And if Taylor's offensive background, supposedly with Sean McVay and the Rams and whatnot, if that carries over into this year finally. Wide receiver John Ross as my breakout player. I think this finally could be his year. You have Burrow, who's a strong arm quarterback. He'll let the ball loose down the field. Ross, fastest 40 time, like I said, in the combine history. Look for him and Joe Burrow to form a good relationship on the field. As I think A.J. Green will get a lot of playing time still this year, but he might kind of get to phase out as he's probably not going to be around much longer. They're going to try and give opportunities to young guys like Ross and Higgins and Boyd. And I think Ross, if he stays healthy, he could have a big year. And when I say big year, I mean maybe 40 to 50 catches, but a guy who averages about 20 yards a catch gets five or six long touchdowns and even can turn some screens into some big games. Just an explosive player, kind of like what the Eagles are hoping out of Deshaun Jackson this year, or the Bills with like John Brown. Just a guy like that, who a reliable deep threat. In two big games, Week 1 versus the Chargers. Obviously, first game of Burrow's career. First game with coaching with Zach Taylor, coaching his new young quarterback. And Week 5 versus the Ravens. I think Ravens have the best defense in the league, at least on paper. Going to be one of the best teams in the league. It'll be interesting to see how Burrow handles himself versus probably the best team he'll play throughout the entire season.
Yeah, let me just apologize to Zach Taylor. Didn't mean to lean on you that hard. I have nothing against the guy. I'm sure he's a great guy.
I'm sure he's listening.
I just don't really want him leading my NFL team. I think that's pretty fair.
I think that was just like a premature hire. I think he might have been I think he was the quarterback coach for the Rams. And he just got hired because he was from the Rams, and everyone wanted someone like McVay. So I think they're hoping that. But yeah, you got anything else before we head out on this one?
No, I saw that you just tweeted out my Baker Mayfield take, so that'll be fun to see the comments on that.
We'll keep that one stored for the future. But thanks for hopping on again, Kevin. We only got, believe it or not, 2 more episodes left of the series for the regular season. Then I was hoping maybe we can squeeze in just a playoff bracket show as well, and kind of run through that.
Yeah, that'll be fine. We can sort of go through all of the teams that we might end up having completely wrong in the playoffs. So
yeah, exactly. All right. Well, thanks again, Kevin. Thanks again, everyone, for listening. If you're still listening, I appreciate it. Just subscribe to the podcast, share it out, and thanks for joining us again, guys. I'll talk to you soon.